You know, as a writer, you can take the story in any direction you want, except the opposite. But that's the direction Arcane Season 2 decided to take before abandoning the steering wheel entirely. It's been a while since I've seen a crash like this. Though it might be hard to see the damage through all the audiovisual spectacle and good faith garnered by Arcane Season 1, Season 2 deviates significantly from what made the first season beloved, which may feel like a betrayal to anyone expecting a continuation of the same tone and depth. Arcane Season 1 was highly praised by both fans and critics by offering a satisfying and creative take on the League of Legends franchise. It had strong themes,
It's not gonna solve your problems. It just makes more of them.
a diverse range of complex characters,
But he didn't make Jinx. You did.
above average visual storytelling, and a lot of strong emotional moments that people are still talking about today. It was a breath of fresh air among a lot of the Disney sludge that year and gave me hope that there are still creators who respect the IP they're adapting. So there were high hopes for the second season, and after 3 years of waiting, it was easy to expect that the show would deliver another banger season, especially since the first one set all the pieces in their place for a dramatic continuation of the battle between Piltover and Zaun. The show's climax took time to highlight where these characters are and what we should look forward to, heavily implying that the story isn't over yet, and the creators still have several things planned out. However, after watching the second season, I came to believe that nothing was actually planned, and whatever plot threads the original writers had set up were largely ignored or misinterpreted by the new ones. Because I cannot in good conscience believe that this is what it was all leading to. Yeah, just like Donald Trump, I'm sure the creators had concepts of a plan,
I have concepts of a plan.
but the final result proves that this new batch of writers had their own plans to go against what Season 1 established, and waste a potential that could have been easily achieved if they stuck with what they had instead. But I think it's even worse than ignorance. The choices made in this season were so poor and in bad faith, the new writers must have actually hated Season 1 to some extent and wanted to completely make the season their own thing. If you like the season, that's great. But if you care at all about the art of storytelling or want to be a writer, Arcane Season 2 is the perfect learning tool to test your own analysis skill and try to find everything a writer should not do, especially when you're following up on a well-written story like Arcane Season 1. But to help you on your journey, I'll start off with what I call the writing betrayals of Arcane Season 2. These are what I consider the most egregious parts of the second season that not only manages to ruin its own story, but begins to infect Season 1 with its toxic venom. So remember, anything I bring up in this video is only scratching the surface of the problems that can be found in this season. So let's not waste any more time. This is your spoiler alert for Season 1 and Season 2. Also, I will be a bit harsh, so if you're still in your honeymoon period with this season, you may need to brace yourself.
Maybe Arcane was the friends we made along the way.
When you're the writer, it's easy to think that you have unlimited power to make your characters do whatever they want, but that's not true, at least if you're trying to write a higher quality story. If in the story you establish something fundamental about a character, you have to stick with those limitations, or spend time justifying the change. Some may think that's limiting, but others make great use of those limitations. Batman's no-killing rule and lack of superpowers are fundamental parts of his character that resulted in what we know as Batman. He uses his stealth and cunning because he has no powers, and he is so well prepared because the writers know he can't just kill his enemies, so he has to find some clever way to win instead.
I can't believe you got him!
And to be so well prepared, he has to be smart and disciplined.
You won't do that again.
Unless I want to.
When you have these character foundations, the story and the conflict suddenly become clearer, because you will feel naturally inclined to challenge those foundations, and you will think of the best way to do it.
If you want to stop it, you're gonna have to shoot me! Right in my face!
This is turning out even better than I'd hoped.
One of the strongest parts of Arcane Season 1 was the characters. Despite how many there were, you always had a good idea of who they were and what their purpose in the show was. The most important part about them was not their weapons or designs or even their personalities. It was their ideals that were constantly tested when they were pitted against one another or when something dramatic happened in the story. Let's take Jace for example. After being saved by a mysterious mage and exposed to the power of the Arcane, Jace is determined to harness this power to improve lives and save his best friend.
This could save Victor's life.
It's a strong and noble ideal that tells you about Jace's values and why he pursues Hextech. However, those ideals are pitted against Heimerdinger's warnings, dangers like Jinx, and even his own misuse against the people of Zaun, which reveals both his character flaws and the flaws of his ideals. By the end of Season 1, we get a wiser, humbler Jace who understands that neither he nor Hextech is going to solve all of Piltover's and Zaun's problems. His ideals didn't change though, they were refined. You can see how Season 1 challenges the ideals of all the main characters by placing them in difficult moral gray areas, forcing them to make tough choices, whether it's Silco's ambition coming at the cost of his found daughter, Vi's choice to set aside her hatred for enforcers against the common enemy, Powder rejecting her past to empower herself as Jinx, Victor rejecting the power of the Hex Tech at the cost to his own benefit, or Mel siding with Piltover instead of fulfilling her duties to Noxus and her mother. The list goes on. And with all that, Season 1 still had time to develop the main characters beyond their purpose, using the runtime extremely efficiently to get as much depth out of them as they could. Silco, who could have just been a villainous crime lord, was given tons of depth and complexity. You get to see his caring side, his feelings of inadequacy, his highs, his lows, and his relationship with the world that led him to become a crime lord. It made you empathize with him, but never justify his actions. Season 2, on the other hand, treats these strong character foundations like Play-Doh and smushes them into any form they want. It doesn't matter what Season 1 had established about them or what purpose they served in the narrative. To these new writers, these characters are just toys to play for 9 episodes, regardless of any consistency issues. I'm not joking here. I felt like I was watching a toddler banging 2 action figures together to make them kiss.
Rebecca, I love you. I love you too. Marry me, Rebecca. No. Why? I don't love you. Whoopsies! Rebecca!
Even the most basic character traits and ideals have been completely abandoned. While I'm not against taking these characters in a different direction, I'm talking about the equivalent of Sauron suddenly deciding to end his pursuit of the ring to get a job at a small vegan dessert shop. At that point, it's a new parody character, and that's how I see these characters in Season 2. I have no idea who these people are anymore, because any foundation that was set up has been torn down.
It's wrong what's been done to you. You'd be well within your rights to keep it. But if you do, this cycle of violence will never stop. This city needs healing. More than I ever realized.
Take Y for example. Could you give me a reason why Y would not be an enforcer? I'll give you 3. 1.
I watched them kill my parents.
That's a pretty good motivation, right? You know, there was this traumatic childhood event that involves her and her younger sister watching enforcers massacre her parents and people. Even the opening scene shows a depiction of these enforcers as demonic entities in a child's mind. You would think that would leave a lasting impression. To emphasize this point, we even have a close-up of Vile looking angrily at the enforcers. It's practically the equivalent of Batman losing his parents, and I think you'd all find it strange if Batman became a mugger suddenly. 2. She spent her entire childhood under enforcer oppression. The show establishes that Zonites are basically second-class citizens who are kept away from the luxuries of Piltover. And enforcers are not just enforcing the law, they're enforcing the separation between Zon and Piltover. So a child of Zon would see the enforcers as symbols of oppression. 3. She was kept in prison for 6 years as a teenager. Yeah, did you forget about that? Not only was she kept in prison, she was abused countless times. That's what the guard said, countless times.
How many chats have you had with her?
You know, I never even thought to count.
If that doesn't inscribe everlasting hatred towards enforcers, I don't know what will. I don't know about you, but those 3 reasons are pretty solid. Even in Season 1, I thought the relationship between Y and Caitlin felt contrived. While I wasn't against Y warming up to Caitlin throughout the story, it happened way too fast and with very little difficulty. It doesn't really matter if Caitlin was one of the good enforcers. It's doubtful Y would indulge her, let alone get romantically involved with her so quickly. But okay, at least I saw what the show was trying to set up. Caitlin was there to challenge Y's views on enforcers. But would that be enough to make her don the uniform herself? Absolutely not. Why the heck would she? She has already proven herself to be an ally who is willing to help Piltover if they have a common enemy. So what would the badge and uniform give her that she doesn't have already? I'm sure Caitlin and Jace would trust her with the gauntlets. You could argue the uniform would let her move around Piltover without being bothered by other enforcers, but the show established that Y is kind of a legend among the enforcers.
You're something of a legend amongst the enforcers.
So it wouldn't be a problem. And besides, most of their work takes place in Zon, and Zonauts are not exactly willing to cooperate with enforcers. Y would actually be more efficient as a non-enforcer.
I was wrong to spring the badge on you.
But I think that also goes against what the show was establishing about Y in Season 1. I kind of thought that the show was setting Y up to be the next Vander.
Those kids look up to you.
Yeah, I know.
When people look up to you, you don't get to be selfish.
You know, she defeats the criminal empire of Zon, takes over, and because she has a good relationship with the Council, Jace, and Caitlin, they can start to establish independence between Zon and Piltover. No, but that's not it. Well, maybe because Caitlin is in charge, Y believes that she will be part of a new type of enforcers that direct their strength against the criminals of the Undercity while upholding the decency and civility that Caitlin maintained in Season 1.
You gonna help me out, Cupcake?
Stop calling me that.
But you're so sweet.
Or Y just goes along with gassing her people. I'm sorry, what? Yes, Y's grief-stricken girlfriend decides to use toxic gas against Zon to flush out Jinx and the other criminals. The show is trying really hard to show that only criminals are affected by it, but it's a gas, it's not something you can easily control. Not to mention highly inefficient, as it would take Jinx a single gas mask to nullify it. So not exactly a wise choice. There's a 0% chance that Y would go along with Caitlyn, especially when Caitlyn is using excessive force on criminals who aren't even on Jinx's side and want to get her themselves. You mentioned the criminals who are like, okay, we need to catch Jinx and we're gonna help the authorities get her. Yeah. And the authorities come in, beat the shit out of them. Just go, where's Jinx? Why are you hiding her from us? They're like, what are you talking about? We're trying to help. Unlikely story, die. You're going away for a long time, scumbag. But the bigger betrayal comes right after the glimmer of hope when Vi finally notices that something is wrong and asks to talk to Caitlyn in private. I was stupid enough to think that she would bring up excessive force, the gas, or even the fact that they're just taking down criminals who don't know anything about Jinx nor about the attack at the memorial ceremony. But no, instead Vi is worried about her new enforcer friends and about Caitlyn changing without bringing up what exactly is changing about her.
Everyone in my life has changed. Promise me you won't change.
And then they kiss. What? Why? Do you think this is an appropriate time? They are in a relationship, I understand. But do you think the idea that using chemical warfare and excessive use of violence would diminish their relationship, not enhance it? It would have been more appropriate if she rejected the kiss to show a growing distance or disagreement between them. But I suppose the show needs its fan service, right? Even if it's not the right time for it. Oh, but don't you worry, there's a far worse fan service at a much more inappropriate time. And again, Vi is making out with an enforcer as an enforcer while oppressing Zonites. That's a triple whammy. You would need so much time and effort to unravel this and make this good that I would just scrap the entire idea altogether. Eventually, Y does break out of her simjutsu and her relationship with Caitlyn. At this point, there's no way that she would ever trust an enforcer. Imagine being oppressed by enforcers all your life, only to warm up to one, just to have them betray you and reaffirm that there's no such thing as a good enforcer. It also doesn't help that Caitlyn becomes an oppressive dictator as well. And Y kissed her. Y should be washing her mouth out with soap every time she remembers that kiss. But okay, at least Y can now move on and find her place among her people. Maybe go after Jinx on her own so they can set up the drama between Vi, Jinx, and Caitlyn where they all kind of hate each other and the lines between friends and enemies are blurred. Or Y goes on a broken emo phase, befriends Jinx, gets back together with Caitlyn, and makes love in a prison cell after Jinx tells Y she's going to Minecraft herself. That's what I was left asking after watching just 4 episodes of this season. Besides the character model, nothing is consistent about her. But it's not just Y, it's every character in this season. None of them are acting like themselves, or worse, doing things utterly antithetical to their established character. Whether it's Jinx going back to being Powder, Jace becoming a crazy murderous psycho, the caring and analytical Caitlyn becoming a hateful and emotional enforcer, or whatever the hell they did with Victor.
In the pursuit of great, we fail to do good. The glorious evolution is destined.
The only season 1 character that wasn't completely destroyed was Singed, but that's not much of an achievement. His entire journey can be boiled down to, does science to revive his daughter? Revives his daughter. It doesn't really matter who funded his work, that's all he did. It's the narrative equivalent of a character putting bread in a toaster and waiting for it to pop out. It would be pretty difficult to mess that story up, but at the same time, it's not exactly utilizing a character like Singed at all. If you want, you can do a little test. Watch season 1 and write down the beliefs and values of each character. Then, watch season 2 and cross out when those values are abandoned. You'll be shocked to see how little these characters were left with.
Half a dozen enforcers, dead!
Yeah.
A building blown to pieces!
Oh, yeah. Wake up, sis. I'm a hero.
But hey, maybe if they commit to the new versions of these characters, they can still tell a pretty good story. I'm very curious about what goals the writing team of Arcane Season 2 had set up. Was there a quota to have all these concepts in one season? Was each writer just given an episode to write without knowing what happens before or after it? Was there some kind of inclusive producer who said everyone's ideas are great? I just don't understand the logic behind having so many different things happen and for none of them to matter. It's like watching a bad juggler trying to juggle too many balls. At some point it just becomes sad. Season 1 juggled a lot of balls too, but they kept everything focused around one premise, the invention of Hextech. All the different character drama and conflict revolved around Hextech in one way or another. More importantly, the level of narrative commitment behind the character's actions is praiseworthy. Every decision had consequences. Every blunder prompted the character to act accordingly. If Jinx did something wrong, it had consequences for Silco, which prompted the Chem Barons to question Silco's power, which prompted one to ask Savika to do something about it, and so on and so forth. The whole world felt alive and dynamic because every action had some kind of reaction. It's your basic therefores and buts of plotting that Matt Stone and Trey Parker talk about.
We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words and then belong between those beats, you're f***ed. Should be this happens, and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens.
However, the only buts in Season 2 are typically followed by it doesn't. Caitlyn becomes an authoritarian commander, but then she doesn't. Vi believes Powder is gone and wants to kill Jinx, but then she doesn't. Jace goes crazy, but then he doesn't. Powder becomes Jinx, but then she doesn't. Mel wants to take down Sallow, but then she doesn't. Jinx becomes a revolutionary hero, but then she doesn't. Never before have I seen so many concepts picked up and immediately dropped. A lot of these concepts would fill a season on their own, and yet they just get swept under the rug when the world-ending event shows up. So lame. I mean, why do we need to care about Zaun's revolution, Vi and Jinx's story, Caitlyn's revenge, or anything if everyone just joins forces to fight what boils down to an Ultron ripoff?
How is humanity saved if it's not allowed to evolve?
I don't really think Arcane needs to rip off Avengers, and they just kept adding and adding and adding new things that will never get resolved or most likely will just be forgotten. You have this big dramatic scene of Vi fighting Jinx to the death, and then 2 episodes later they're just hanging out and quipping as if that fight never happened. The battle between Jinx and Vi should not be a checkmark, but a lot of the things did feel like checkmarks that they just had to tick off. There were a lot of grand ideas, but none of them felt significant, because they were not given the time or attention that they needed. For example, Caitlyn becomes an authoritarian commander. Surely, such a dramatic character change warrants an exploration of how she managed to deal with commanding a large-scale operation, the moral implications, and the weight of responsibility she has to deal with in a new position. Nope, we don't see her making a single important decision as a commander. In fact, she immediately betrays Ambessa as soon as she gets back to Vi. What the heck was the point of this dramatic chest-pounding, ominous music, and the commander cape if it doesn't mean anything in the story? Like, all the visuals are telling me she's becoming like a Darth Vader kind of villain, but then she just doesn't. Caitlyn, she shouldn't be in charge, and she hasn't really earned the position of being in charge.
She was barely a good enforcer, let alone a ruler of an entire kingdom or whatever it is.
I keep joking. She's failing upward. She failed to stop the terrorist attack. Then she also failed to get Jinx, and
by the way, gassed up half the people in the process.
She's now the dictator.
Yeah, now she's commander of all.
But what about Ambessa's plan? She takes a special interest in Piltover because she wants more Hextech weapons, right? That's why she orchestrated the attack during the memorial. She wants to justify the manufacturing of Hextech weapons. But then the show removes all the characters who know how to make Hextech weapons, leaving Ambessa to help Caitlyn with martial law against Zaun. Why? Ambessa was pulling the strings. But
was she? Was she pulling the strings? What did she really do that Caitlyn wasn't already doing?
But don't worry, that gets dropped as Ambessa is now interested in Singe's creations, but then that gets dropped when she finds Victor. I'm sorry, why does Ambessa think that a godlike machine mage who wants to turn humanity into a hive mind of robots any better than the Black Rose? Who cares? She just becomes a mini-boss for the Arcane squad anyway.
What are we? Some kind of League of Legends?
However, I think the biggest lack of commitment was with Jinx. I was baffled to see that Arcane Season 2 decided to take notes from Joker 2. It's odd to see 2 works of fiction this year where a character rejects their persona that initially liberated and empowered them, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's strange that it happened twice, and it's disappointing in both cases. Essentially, when you have a dramatic character evolution such as Arthur Fleck becoming the Joker or Powder becoming Jinx, the natural desire for the audience is to explore this new persona and see how it affects the story as it goes forward. I think Season 1 made it pretty clear that Powder is gone. Wasn't that the whole point of the party scene? You can actually treat it as a birthday party for Jinx, and the attack on Piltover as her final decision to fully embrace her chaotic nature. So in Season 2, I expected the creators to take full advantage of Jinx. No longer was she held back by Silco, Vi, or anyone else, and with her track record of killing the ones closest to her, I doubt she would want to have any friends or pick a side in a battle. She could have easily worked as a Joker-like character, an unpredictable force of chaos to contrast Caitlyn's vision of order. I expected her to basically be closer to how she's depicted in the League of Legends shorts. While we get a bit of that trickery, for some reason the writers are not committing to Jinx, choosing to instead have her waste time doing nothing, force her into being a hero of Zaun, or attempt to turn her back into Powder by trying to rebuild the family she lost. Thematically, it's a huge step backwards. And it's not like you couldn't express that she still has some feelings for Vi. It would just need to be expressed through actions or symbols, whether it's drawings, non-lethal traps, pranks, or anything that would hint that part of Powder is still there, but it can't be that overt where she goes back to her original mindset. To me, it suggests that the writers are not confident about where they're going to take this character, assuming that her story's already been told. A more competent writer would say it's just the beginning. It also doesn't help that the writers are trying to turn Jinx into a revolutionary leader, which again doesn't work the way it's depicted now. Jinx is way too passive and isn't shown to do anything that would typically inspire anyone to side with her. She barely shows herself, let alone have a cause.
Everybody hates Jinx at this point, which is why Jinx is going to go into hiding effectively. So, when did she become this revolutionary Shigavari leader?
Wasn't her
Now,
at all.
Jinx had been like actively stopping enforcers, coming up with all these cool contraptions, indirectly protecting people, then it makes sense. But she literally disappeared and went into hiding for like ages.
When I look at my revolutionary leaders, I really like them when they're hiding and not engaging with the community. They didn't even commit to their revolution, as it was sidelined by the war with Noxus, whatever they were doing with Victor, Echo's what if shenanigans, the Black Rose nonsense, and whatever else I missed because I just stopped caring. Hey, don't blame me. If the show doesn't care about the things it was setting up, why should I? Well, at least they can only ruin their own season, right?
God, I'm shit at this.
Look, it's one thing to ruin characters you were given in Season 2, but to revise the history established in Season 1 and ruin the story that way, that's a new pathetic low. It's like the writers are afraid that their season won't be considered canon by Arcane fans, so they're trying to sink their little tendrils into Season 1 to prevent it from being separated. Not since the Star Wars sequels have I seen such gross revisionism in a franchise. Rey's parents were really important. No, they weren't. They were nobodies. No, well, her parents weren't, but her grandparent, he's Palpatine, yes. And that he came back for cloning, and it's a secret only the Sith knows, even though there was a whole literal clone war about it. It's kind of sad and funny that Arcane Season 2 tries to pretend like everything was leading to this final culmination of events, when it's pretty clear that absolutely nothing was set up to get the conclusion they wanted. They had to morph the characters and force them into events that would have never played out the way they did if the show had any consistency or commitment. And the harder the writer's hand pushes the events and characters to suit their story, the more problems slip through its fingers. Did you know that Vander and Silco knew Vi, Powder, and their parents before the events in Season 1? They even promised their mom to take care of Vi and Powder too.
I can't protect her from all the shit down here. You two are gonna figure this Zahn thing out. You're not allowed to fail anymore. For her.
A little bit ominous that you would request something like that, but okay. Oh, and the reason why I got her name was because of Vander.
I've always liked the name Violet.
It's a little bit odd that someone would name their daughter after a random name their friend mentions. But okay, that's possible. Those are not exactly big issues, they just feel a little bit contrived. But think about the implications of Vander and Silco knowing who Vi and Powder are, or promising to take care of them. It completely recontextualizes their actions in Season 1. It undermines the scene where Vander drops his gauntlets and takes the kids instead. Rather than realizing the devastation his violent rebellion brought to the innocent and choosing to give it up for them, all he is doing now is fulfilling a promise he made a long time ago. While that doesn't sound like a terrible thing, it takes away any thematic agency from the character. If he doesn't realize that violence wasn't the answer in that scene, why doesn't he continue? And why would Vi and Powder even be at the bridge if Vander promised to take care of them? Surely if some rebellion was about to go down, don't you think that Vander and Silco would prioritize the family's safety first? We would need a completely different scene than the scene we got in Episode 1. And why the heck is Silco so willing to kill both kids in the first act of Season 1? Sure, he's a villain, but why would he forget his promise to Felicia?
You know what bore us through those times? Loyalty.
Silco, a man who values loyalty above all else, just casually goes,
"Kill them!"
As if those kids didn't even matter. Silco hates Vander, but I don't see him breaking his promise to Felicia so willingly. And this new context completely rips any meaning out of one of the most powerful moments in the season. And that's where Silco embraces Powder. Just watch the entire scene again, you can pretty clearly infer the thought process going in Silco's head. He emphasizes with Powder's agony because he knows what it's like to be betrayed by the ones closest to him. That's why he looks at Vander's body before embracing Powder. He's not thinking, oh, now that Vander is dead, I guess I have to take care of this girl for Felicia. And what character journey would Silco go if he didn't know about Vi and Powder? He would have been caring and supportive for these kids, then stopped caring for them and wanted them dead, but then he learned the value of Powder so much that he was willing to give up his dream for her. I don't know, you're doing some writing gymnastics here where I don't think you need to. You don't need to do all these backflips when the original setup was perfectly fine. But your greedy little fingers couldn't let them be, could they? But by far, the biggest revision is the fact that the man who saved Jace was actually Victor all along. What? I don't believe you. Can someone please explain how and why? I'm sure the writers thought they were so smart with that twist, but they must be too smart for me because I don't understand the mechanics of this twist. So future Victor went back in time to give Jace the rune to stop his past self from destroying the world. But the reason why the mainline Victor dabbled with Hextech was because Jace introduced this power to him. If future Victor hadn't given Jace the rune or saved him, then Jace would not have been exposed to the Hex crystals and Victor would not have discovered Hextech to begin with. Am I reading this right? No, I must be wrong. It would be absurd if Victor tried to save the world from Hextech by prompting the creation of Hextech. I know that someone's probably going to say that Victor must have discovered Hextech and become evil regardless of Jace. But then, why would that version of Victor care about Jace? Why is Jace so crucial? And he have the power to go to different dimensions in different times, like why does this one universe matter at all? On that note, did Victor know that Jace is going to try to kill him once he gets back to his own universe? Was that all part of the plan? Why couldn't Jace just tell Victor about this horrible future? Or better yet, let Victor examine his mind to see for himself? And if future Victor is so powerful that he can travel through time and dimensions, why doesn't he just connect to his alternate self and warn him about this future? Or take over past Victor's body the way Echo did when he went to a different dimension. Speaking of Echo, what about that dimension he visited? It seemed pretty peaceful. Was there a world-ending catastrophe there? And is this really the ultimate outcome that could have happened out of the infinite dimensions? I don't understand what Victor can and can't do. I don't understand his powers. I don't know what he's capable of. No matter how I look at it, it doesn't work. It does not compute. It doesn't work. I don't know what multiverse of madness they're trying to pull here, but it doesn't work, and you don't need Victor to be the mage. What they had originally was perfectly serviceable. A child got a glimpse of arcane power and spent his life trying to comprehend and harness it without understanding the consequences of his ambition. The whole point of Jace's arc can be summed up with the scene from Jurassic Park.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
If Victor was always the mage, all those cool implications and ethical dilemmas are made invalid, because all that Jace is doing now is enacting Victor's will. The same will that would create the problem in the first place. It ruins the whole thematic point of Season 1, I don't understand. I refuse to believe that the wizard was meant to be Victor from the beginning. It's such a clear afterthought that acknowledging it would be a betrayal on its own. I simply hope that I'm misinterpreting something here. Let me know in the comments if I'm getting this wrong, because no matter what angle I'm looking at this, it doesn't make sense. Honestly, if you're a writer, just avoid the multiverse thing. It's not worth it. You're just gonna write yourself into a corner. And we don't need any of these revisions. All it did was give us additional unnecessary context to events of Season 1 that would make the season worse if we acknowledged it. And I simply don't. Instead of trying to improve what can already be considered a masterpiece, why not focus on making your own season great? And he had plenty of opportunities to do so. Speaking of which...
I had the shot.
You know what else I don't understand? How can someone who claims to be a professional writer have so little enthusiasm for telling stories? You get a chance to follow up on arguably one of the best animated TV series, a chance that many would kill for, and you can't even be inspired to make the most out of the opportunity you were given? Did you even open a League of Legends lore book? Did you even try to think a bit deeper about these characters beyond their names, looks, abilities, and who you're going to ship them with? Perhaps think about what they could represent, what they could tell us about our own society, or use them for a cautionary tale maybe? And I know it sounds pretentious when I say look at a character and think about what they could represent, but it's a good exercise to do when you think about what this character could do in the story, because you're trying to figure out why that character is the only character that can do this in the story. If you can just swap or remove characters and it doesn't affect the plot, then those are unnecessary characters to have. Let's take Heimerdinger for example. While not the most utilized character, I think he serves a simple purpose. He was there as a symbol of inaction. Think about it, we never saw him do anything scientific, and most of his time was spent preventing Jace and Victor from progressing their own inventions, unwilling to embrace the new and disruptive technology, and yet not offering a better alternative either. I'm not surprised he gets kicked out of the council, but that's great. Now he can move to Zaun and learn that his inaction can be just as harmful as action. And now he can go on his own journey and find out how his knowledge can help those in need. Heck, maybe getting out of politics would inspire him to get back into inventing and build something that would help save the day too. Or we just kill him. Okay, I guess you had nothing to use him for, right? Even with the limited amount of time that he was on screen, they didn't do anything with him. I could just edit him out of the season, and you wouldn't even miss him. Does he even know about the attack on the council? Wouldn't it have been interesting to see him back on the council and take action for a change? I'm sure you could have done something with him. And what about Savika? After losing her boss, she could have taken over operations and continued pursuit of Zaun's independence by mobilizing the criminals against Jinx too. Heck, she could have worked with Caitlyn. That would have been a cool dynamic. Savika never really had a close relationship with Jinx anyway. And does she even know that Jinx killed Silco? How does she feel about that? I feel that should have been addressed. No? You just want her to be the comedic straight man? You want her to be the Squidward to Jinx's SpongeBob?
I'm gonna hate this, aren't I?
I mean, you can do that, but why? I feel like you wanted her to be more important than that. You put her on the council after all. all. May I ask how and why? She was the right-hand woman for Silco's, the crime lord's operations. How did she become a council member? I'm not saying she couldn't be, but that's a fascinating part of the story, I think. As I said, I think the foreshadowing was there, but then they didn't do anything with that. But by far, I think one of the worst missed opportunities was their take on Warwick. Out of all the League of Legends characters, I have a special place in my heart for Warwick. A cyborg wolf killing machine that struggles to hold on to his humanity? What's not to like? And if you had to turn one Arcane character into him, Vander would make both thematic and narrative sense. So I think most fans guessed that's exactly what Arcane was foreshadowing in Season 1. But once again, Season 1 gently rolled the ball, and Season 2 fumbled over trying to kick it. The initial introduction had some cool moments, but as soon as Warwick snapped back into his Vander self, I knew this character would be completely emasculated and treated more like a helpless pup rather than the destructive power that he could have been. And yeah, even in the League of Legends lore, Warwick has a humanity left within him, which prevents him from harming the weak and innocent.
And yet, part of the human creature remains.
But it was a lot more subtle than actually going for a family hug or being held by the hand as he's taken to the vet. His transformation back to Vander was extremely rushed and barely gave us any time to actually fear Warwick's power and emphasize his tragic existence. We got a brief showcase of his power, but then, just like Savika's arm, it was used once and never used again. Imagine him being a looming threat throughout the entire season, which would have added a level of intrigue between the Battle of Zaun and Piltover. This extra variable could have affected Caitlyn's pursuit of revenge, the turf war, and Bess's desire for Hextech. Warwick himself could have been the big bad on his own. Just watch the Warwick champion teaser and tell me that would not be a cool, tense element to add to the conflict. Warwick, the uncaged wrath of Zaun. He's vicious, practically immortal, super powerful, driven by rage and the smell of blood. Man, thematically he could have been used in so many different ways. Both represent the consequences of meddling with powers beyond one's control, and the physical manifestation of the violence between Zaun and Piltover. Think about his entire premise. What is the significance of him being attracted to the scent of blood, and how would that affect the plot? Well, it would force these characters not to immediately resort to violence, giving them a moment to try to reconcile their differences in non-violent ways. Just imagine two characters ready to duke it out when they hear Warwick's howl as a warning, or a scene where Ambessa is leading her army into Zaun, but the soldiers who know Warwick are starting to back away or even flee before the fight even begins. It could have been a perfect justification for Ambessa to ask for Hextech weapons, or even ask for Victor's help. And thematically, it would suit both Warwick and Vander, as Vander was the one teaching Wide that not every conflict can be resolved with violence. Sure, he had to become the embodiment of violence to encourage non-violent conflict resolutions, but I think that still works great. His existence would have been a much better reason to bring out the Grey too. Imagine Caitlyn getting the Kiraman key, but she refuses to use it right away, believing she's not ready to unleash that power. But after suffering at the hands of Warwick, Caitlyn has no choice but to use it to weaken him or draw him out into an ambush. And you could have still had the same tragedies play out as they did in the show now, but with much more impact. You could have still had Jinx and Vi discovering that Warwick is Vander, which would potentially force them to defend him against both Zaun and Piltover. And of course, you could still have him sacrifice himself for them. And his sacrifice could remind them that the protection of Zaun is in their hands. It just writes itself. But look at what we have now. What does Warwick represent in the show currently? A henchman for Singed? A helpless creature in need of help? Or some weird attempt to bring the family back together? Even though Season 1 was trying hard to establish that Vi and Jinx are going down their separate paths.
Here's to the new us.
They're looking for new friends, new families, new identities. Forcing them back into a happy family feels completely antithetical to the themes the show was exploring prior. This is why I knew that whatever the show is trying to build up with Vander won't work, so all you're doing now is just waiting for things to go wrong, which of course it does. The key to a good tragedy is hoping that things will work out, and being upset when they don't, not when you can see that things won't work out. Though to me, the best tragedy is when you know things are bad, and despite all your attempts, you can't do anything about it. And that's what Warwick's strength in the show should have been. A man who wanted nothing but peace and safety for his daughters turned into a creature of rage and violence, and yet his tragic, contradictory existence helps gain a level of peace even if it means uniting Zaun and Piltover against him and forcing his daughters to suffer the loss again. But why have all that when you could instead have...
Maddie.
So what do you do when you already have a large cast of characters and a potential pool of other champions that didn't have a chance to make their appearance? Do you A. focus only on the characters you have already and develop them further? B. Eliminate some of the less important characters and replace them with the most iconic and suitable picks for this part of the story? C. Add a bunch of bland, no-named OCs and write them into the lives of the main characters? If your answer is C, I'd like you to stop pursuing your writing career or focus on writing your own original work, because you clearly don't find the franchises you're working on engaging enough. I'm sorry, but why should I care about this lot of bland, unimaginative, one-note characters when there's a treasure trove of well-established characters and a whole slew of potential characters with deeper backstories, interesting designs, and probably more significance to the story? The fact that these enforcers managed to stay alive for this long without being killed by Jinx or Warwick should be a betrayal on its own. They were the narrative equivalent of prime rib to showcase some devastating violence or motivate the characters to do something dramatic. Fish Guy, Blander, and Ginger Girl, as they are commonly known online, had all the hallmarks of cannon fodder, where they're just likable enough to make you feel bad for them, but bland enough where you won't miss them when they're gone. But no, consider my expectations subverted when these nobodies are still kicking around by Act 3. Worst of all, these storytelling parasites force themselves into the lives of important characters, with Ginger Girl becoming Caitlyn's bounce-back girlfriend, and then later betraying Caitlyn because she was working for Mbessa the whole time. Huh? At what point did that happen? It wasn't before the relationship, right? Because Ginger was supposedly suggesting that Caitlyn should go against Mbessa's wishes and call off martial law in episode 4.
You could call it off. Withdraw from the underground. Re-establish the council.
And we never established why Ginger would betray Caitlyn in the first place. Geez, they couldn't even keep their OCs consistent. And what's the significance of Blander? We see why I randomly stumble upon him, they both share a drink, and it turns out that he and the other two enforcers will be part of Caitlyn's strike unit. What a coincidence. Blander and Y become such close friends that they actually live out a Cyberpunk 2077 cutscene.
But you can only be a Major League player for so long! The faster you live, the faster you burn out! If you don't get a bullet to the brain first!
Wow, these two are really bonding. I bet Y would be devastated if something happened to him. Never mind, he's pretty much completely forgotten about after he gets killed. Cool. Season 1 had a bunch of original characters that weren't in the League of Legends game, but they all served their purpose and never overstayed their welcome. Imagine if freaking Clogger survived the explosion and resumed to be a character for the rest of the series. Not saying it's impossible to work, but why would you make it more difficult for yourself when simply having them die in an explosion would be easier and more impactful? The fact that most people don't know these characters' names should be an indication that they're not a useful addition to the story, and what genuine impact they have. Does Ginger becoming Caitlyn's girlfriend change anything? No. Caitlyn and Y just make up and get together without Ginger even complaining. Does Blander offer anything meaningful or add anything to the drama? Nope. Then why have them? I don't think a single new addition makes an impact to the plot. The mute girl maybe? But she wouldn't be needed if Jinx was actually doing something. She sacrifices herself, and despite how the show is really trying hard to make me care for this mute girl, I just didn't. Why? Because she has no purpose being in the show. Jinx already had the trauma of losing her friends and her sister, what's one more gonna add? Yet, the amount of importance Arcane is putting on this random little girl makes me think that she's a writer's self-insert in an Arcane fanfiction. Think about it, she forces herself into the plot, suddenly befriends the main characters, progresses the plot, and has a badass pose before making a heroic sacrifice to save the day. How old is she, like 8? What kind of little girl would do any of the things that she's doing? Yeah, I'm placing my bets on self-insert, but whose? And speaking of contributing absolutely nothing, if you know League of Legends, you know that its marketing is focused around creating cool cinematic music videos to quickly get you excited and invested in the game like this. Or events like this.
Yike went for a very late reset though, completely cleaned out his topside jungle, so...
It's a very effective marketing technique that creates a sense that whatever you're doing is bigger and more dramatic than it actually is. So I'm not surprised that this form of storytelling was used in Arcane too, but once again, only one season understood the assignment. In Season 1, the music videos were weaved into the narrative to enhance the important moments in the story. For example, the fight between Echo and Jinx shifts into a music video to create a juxtaposition between their childhood play fighting and the real violence they're enacting on one another. Or what about What Could Have Been, which was used to slow down the pacing to emphasize where every important character is at that pivotal moment. Even though there's a song playing, the story is still progressing and we're getting valuable information. Besides maybe the introduction of the firelights, the song choices and placement in Arcane Season 1 were perfectly serviceable. Even without the emotional impact that music typically has, the meaningful shots and the narrative progression are still there. It never stopped the storytelling just to indulge itself in some cool visuals. In Season 2, the music videos are working overtime to justify any emotional connection with the audience. You can praise the stylization all you want, but if there's barely any narrative depth in the visuals, then it's pointless. For example, in the song Hellfire in Episode 2, no new information is actually conveyed that isn't conveyed in the subsequent scenes. So while in Season 1, the music video slowed down the pacing, Season 2 presses the repeat button. A repeat can also be used to emphasize a point, but I don't think the creators were thinking about that. To me, it felt like they were either running out of budget and decided to pad the series out with over-stylized music videos that don't need much animation, or they knew that they were losing the audience and simply tried to use music videos as a quick and cheap way to create an emotional connection. If you're like me, you probably found these music videos to be a huge waste of time that could have been spent telling a story. But if there's one consistent thing about Arcane Season 2, is that it loves to waste time. Speaking of which,
Your Hextech projects need more time.
look, I don't want to hear any of you make excuses for any piece of media that the creators didn't have time, the budget, or the number of episodes. Part of being a creator is the ability to tell a great story with the resources you have. That's actually one of the biggest things I value about media: efficiency. Film and animation are expensive forms of art. Every frame costs time, money, and labor. And because all projects have a finite amount of those resources, creators have to carefully manage them only on the things that are crucial to telling a story. This is why it irks me when I see wasteful scenes that don't add any value to the story. If a scene does nothing to develop a character or further the story in any meaningful way, it takes away resources that would have otherwise been used for scenes that would have done so. That's probably the easiest way to tell if a show or story is good or not. Ask yourself, was the scene I saw the best use of time and resources to tell this story? The more your answer is no, the worse the show is. And when it comes to Arcane Season 2, there's so much time wasted on things that don't even matter. Let's ease you in on something simple. There's a scene with the cat girl spying on Salo to find out what he's up to and that he's using a new type of shimmer. Using this, Mel could remove Salo from the council and reduce Mbessa's influence. All good, except Mel gets kidnapped by the Black Rose and the whole shimmer thing is never brought up, and Salo just leaves the council on his own after being healed by Victor. And that doesn't even matter because Mbessa uses Caitlyn to enact martial law, thus taking control from the council. And that doesn't even matter because Mbessa wants Hextech, but there are no signs that make Hextech. Oh, and Sal was also killed by Jace for some reason. What's the point of any of these scenes? Why do we need them? Don't you have other things you set up that need time and attention? And what about this clownish scene? Jinx tries to get herself captured by enforcers, but when she steps out right in front of one in a well-lit area, the enforcer assumes that's not her and gives the dumbest reason for it.
You expect me to believe Jinx, the master criminal, wears pants like that?
Oh, it was such a crappy scene. It was another Disney. You're right. It's the Marvel Disney thing. How do you not know you're an enforcer? There is literally a wanted poster of Jinx in every place, everywhere, all the time. She's never not there.
No wonder no one could catch her the whole year. She wasn't even hiding, she was chilling at home. Caitlyn is doing her detective work, putting pins on the map, going, Jinx is crafted and anticipated. It seems that no matter what I do, she's one step ahead of me. Truly, she's a mastermind. Meanwhile, Jinx is just playing bug battles at home. Nice one, Caitlyn. I see her detective skills haven't improved. Why do we need this scene to take so long? It should have been, Jinx comes out, Enforcer goes, huh? Savika conks her on the head. 5 seconds at most. All you need to establish is that they steal a uniform and disguise themselves. That's it. One of those wind-up monkeys could have done the job. And what's the point of the whole scene between Mel and her fake brother? There's so much time wasted and barely anything is established. It's not even her real brother, and she doesn't even solve the problem herself, it just happens automatically. Again, all you had to do was have Mel trapped in a genjutsu, she uses her shield powers to escape, and we get the conversation with the Black Rose woman. Or better yet, don't even have the Black Rose because that side plot didn't even contribute anything to the main plot. But the most egregious waste of time has to be episode 7. There's a potential war between Zaun and Piltover, Victor's enslaving people and turning them into hive mind machines, Mbessa trying to do some evil stuff, the Black Rose, Jinx is still on the loose. Can we really afford a Marvel What If episode where Echo and Jinx live out their high school romance and go to prom? I don't think so, but that's what we got. You may think it's developing Echo and Powder, but it isn't. This Powder is a different character from the one in our dimension, so any relationship he builds will be completely lost when he returns to his world. Now, if something actually happened that would make him change his views or gain experience that would help him in his dimension, then it might be justified. But all of his challenges were pretty much external. He's trapped in a different dimension and builds a device to get back. That's it. There was so little going on in that episode. I felt like the writers were just writing down whatever their Sims characters were doing in the game. And what character arc does Echo even go through? He was absent for most of the show, spends time hanging out with alternate versions of his friends, and then he returns and saves the day? Victor should have been like,
who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that?
know damn well who I am. Who the fuck is that?
Then again, I have to ask this question for all of the characters. Who are these characters? What's their motivation? What's their arc? They've been bounced around back and forth so much that by the end, I felt nothing when I was watching the final episode. Somehow everything led to this one big Marvel movie fight, and I didn't care at all. It didn't matter how cool the animation or visuals were, because there's no meaning behind them. Nothing was set up in any coherent or logical way because they wasted time on meaningless scenes, meaningless music videos, meaningless characters, meaningless drama, meaningless fan service. And I'm sure there will be Season 2 fans who will claim they like one scene or another, or make defenses for the music videos because the songs were good, or just enjoy the fan theories or Easter eggs in the show. But is this really what you want from your media? Is this really the most you could get from Arcane? Would you keep this season as it is if I offered you an alternative? And can you honestly tell me this was the most efficient use of resources to tell a story? No, it was inefficient. Inefficient.
I haven't finished my assessment.
It was finished before Act 2 even started. The owners of this world did not value what was given to them.
And what is holding it together right now?
Hope.
They had everything. The opportunity, the resources, the support. Why does one cherish all that was given to them so little?
Hubris. The drive that tears down mansions to build sheds.
As long as the sheds are theirs to build.
Don't leave me.
Thank you guys for watching. As always, if you enjoyed these videos, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you think is the biggest betrayal in Arcane Season 2, or maybe explain a few things that maybe I got wrong. There's always a few goodies in the description, so check them out. Thank you again, and I'll see you around.